Be'ezrat Hashem Yitbarach. We are Daf Mem Vav Amud Aleph. Now, the Gemara previously was trying to prove Rabba was trying to prove Rabba. Rabba said previously that Uman does, the Mishnah said that the Uman doesn't have a chazakah, craftsman doesn't have a chazakah. However, Rabba was trying to say that if there was no edim, then he can have a chazakah. Why? Because there's a migu. He can say, if I wanted, I could have bought it on my own. So this is Rabba. Now, Rabba was trying to bring a proof. Rabba was trying to bring a proof to this. So he brought the case. We finished off the case yesterday. That what? Let's say a person, he gives his item to the craftsman, right? He tells him to fix it. The craftsman claims that the settled price was what? 2 zuz. The owner claims the settled price was 1 zuz, right? So we're not going to go into the small details over here, but basically the Gemara says, Hechidami, right on the last line of Mem Hamud Bet. Hechidami, what's the case? Id ika edim, if there is edim, lichze edim maika amri. Let the edim see what exactly was the deal. Id elalav, what's the case? Deleka edim, there's no edim. Vikatani uman meheman migudi ibai amarle lekuchahi biadi. Okay, mehemanami agre. So it says that what? We know that the uman, he was believed to say what he said, right? So he says, what was the case? The case was that there was no edim, and we see that because there was no edim, he has a migu that he could have said, you didn't even, I'm not even fixing it for you. I bought it, right? I bought it. So therefore, he has a migu, and that's why he's believed. Says the Gemara, lo, leolam deleka edim. Really, he's not believed because of this migu, and really, if he doesn't have edim, it doesn't mean that he's right away believed. Vehu de lo ra'a. Okay, so says the Gemara. Now we're talking about where he has a different migu. He doesn't have a migu to say that he bought it, like what we were trying to prove in Rava. He has a different migu. What's the migu? That the guy didn't see it. What does that mean? That means that if the original owner didn't actually see the object by the craftsman, right? The craftsman can say, "Object? What are you talking about? Well, what object are you talking about?" So, and which basically means that now the guy will have to go through everything, and he won't be able to prove that he actually gave the item. So over here, it's a different migu. It's not the same migu, and therefore it wouldn't be a proof to Rabba. Says the Gemara. Mativ Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak asked the question. Uman en lo chazaka. Says the Gemara. Right? It said in the Mishnah, Uman doesn't have chazaka. So the Gemara is trying to infer that what? Uman hu de en lo chazaka. Ha'acher yesh lo chazaka. It's the Uman that doesn't have a chazaka, but someone else will, like if someone else comes along, he will have a chazaka. Okay? So again, what did the Mishnah say? The Mishnah said, Uman en lo chazaka. So the Gemara infers that what? A different case. If it's someone else, right? Let's say the Uman is Reuven, a random case, not connected to our case. Shimon comes along and he wants to claim that he has a chazakah. He's going to have a chazakah. Okay. So says the Gemara, Uman is the one that doesn't have a chazakah, but if it's someone else will have the chazakah. Okay. Says the Gemara, Hechidami. What is the case talking about? If there's edim, why should the other guy that's coming along, meaning why should the new case of some other random person have the chazakah? There's no edim. Vikatani, and it still says Uman en lo chazakah, and the Uman doesn't have a chazakah. Tuvta de Rabba tuvta. The Gemara says you're right. This is a question on Rabba, and that's it. So basically, again, what did we have? We had the Mishnah. The Mishnah said Uman and it doesn't have a chazakah. What did Rabba try saying? Rabbi tried saying, you know when the uman doesn't have a chazakah? Only if there's edim. But if there's no edim, so then he has a migu. Says the Gemara, even that's not correct. Why is that not correct? Because if you try to infer the words from the Mishnah, what does the Mishnah say? The Mishnah says that if the uman doesn't have a chazakah, what does that mean? Only if it's uman, he doesn't have a chazakah. But if it's some other person, they would have a chazakah. Now says the Gemara, what's the case that some other person would have a chazakah and that it would be good and it would be okay? Is it we're talking about where he has edim? No, right? So it must be talking about where there's no edim. So says the Gemara, if we say that from the Mishnah we can infer that if someone else comes along and there's no edim, he can have a chazakah, but basically that means that the uman, which is trying to establish the same case, doesn't have a chazakah. Okay, what does the Mishnah say? The Mishnah says again, if a person comes along and he wants to claim chazakah, as long as he's not uman, it's okay. And what was the case of that? If there's no edim. But Rabba, what did Rabba try saying? That uman, before we get to Rabba. So what does that mean? What does that mean? That means that if you're trying to understand the case of the Mishnah says uman doesn't have chazakah, right? What was the case of the uman not having chazakah? No. It has to be without edim. Why does it have to be without edim? No. Why does it have to be without edim?
The point is
before that, where the Mishnah says uman doesn't have chazakah.
Yeah.
What's the case? There's edim or no edim?
No edim.
No edim. Why is the case no edim?
He had edim. It wouldn't be an issue. What do you mean? He has edim.
No, I don't want to go there. He doesn't have edim. Why doesn't he have edim? According to this question that we just asked, and this is going to disprove
because there's a difference between uman and no one.
Yeah, female. It has to be that when the Mishnah is talking about the case of uman and the uman doesn't have chazakah, it has to be talking about where there's no edim. And yet we still see that uman doesn't have a chazakah. Why is that? Because when the Gemara afterwards, the Gemara right now, when we just spoke, the Gemara is trying to figure out, the Gemara says, uman doesn't have chazakah, but someone else has chazakah. What was that case? That there was no edim. Which means that in this case where there's no edim, what does the Mishnah say? That uman doesn't have chazakah. Yafeh meod. But what did Rabbi try saying? Rabbi tried saying that in the case of the Mishnah, what was it the Mishnah talking about? The Mishnah was talking about where there is chazakah, and therefore when there is no edim, and therefore when there's not going to be edim, he can say amigu. But what is that? But that's a clash with what we just said. Why? Because what we just established through a proof that the Mishnah has to be talking about that there is no edim. And still the Mishnah says that uman doesn't have a chazakah. Therefore, Rabba's whole svara, whole haracha doesn't have what to rely on. Because what was Rabba's whole What is Rabba's whole svara based on? The fact that if there is no edim, he has a migu, right? And why is that? How can Rabba go against the Mishnah? The Mishnah says that uman doesn't have chazakah, right? And he says that there is chazakah. So Rabba is going to tell you, you know why? Because when the Mishnah said there's no chazakah, it's talking about a case where there is edim, and I'm going to be talking about a case where there's no edim. But now, based on the question that we just asked, what's the case of the Mishnah? The case of the Mishnah is where there is no edim. Not like what Rabba was trying to say that there is edim. The case of the Mishnah is where there's no edim, and yet the Mishnah still says that there's no chazakah. Therefore, Rabba can't say his halacha because then it's going against the Mishnah. He said it because he tried saying his halacha, but now we just disproved the fact that it can't be that because the Mishnah said clearly that there's no chazakah. He thought that the Mishnah was only talking about where there is edim. So he said, in that case, if there's no edim, he can have a migun. But now we just proved that the Mishnah was talking about where there's no edim. Okay? Tanu Ramanan. Nitchalfu lo kelim bekelim bevet uman. If a storekeeper, right, or the uman, sorry, he got mixed up with different types of clothes. What does that mean? That means someone gave him a garment, and he to repair, and when he came to get it back, what happened? He gave him someone else's garment. The guy can use it until they get back to the original mistake and they switch it. Bevet avel, if the same thing happened bevet avel or bebet hamishte or in a chatuna, right? So the same thing happens, right? Over here, Baruch Hashem, it's less common, although it can happen with other things. But let's say, I remember in Montreal, it used to happen often, that what? You would go, it's winter, right? You have your coat, you bring your coat, you hang your coat up. And then what happens? Someone by mistake takes your coat and leaves his coat. Can you use his coat? Says the Gemara, no, you cannot use his coat until they get back to the mistake. That's only if it's the uman, and that's what the Gemara is going to ask. What's the difference between uman and bet avel or bet mishteh? No, זה לא ברשותו, זה לא שלו.
איזה ברשותו? שהוא נתן לו ליד אומן, הוא נותן לו ברשות שלו.
Says the Gemara, what's the difference between the Reisha and the Sefer? Why by the Uman can you use it, and why by the Bet Avel or Bet Mishteh you cannot use it? Amarav, I was sitting in front of my uncle. Ve'amarni, v'chi en adam asui lomar le'uman mechor li taliti. What happens when a person goes to the Uman, he goes to the craftsman, what can happen often? He's able to tell the guy, you know what, sell this coat for me. Sell this coat for me, right? So what's going to happen when the Uman, he by mistake, he gave this person's coat to someone else? What is he going to do? He's going to take someone else's coat, which that guy wants to sell his coat, right? And he's going to give it to the owner of the coat that got lost, right? Now what's going to happen? When he gives it to him, and then the guy is possibly going to buy it. Right? He's going to say, this coat is even better than my coat. How much is this coat? So when he gives him the coat, when he gives him someone else's coat, it's someone else's coat that this guy now has a possibility of buying. And since he's an Uman, it's considered as if he's in a store or something like that, right? So now he has the ability to tell the guy, you know what? Take it for a trial run. I'm giving you 20 days. You're right. I think Amazon has these this thing. If you buy something, you can buy it for 7 days, right? If you want to buy like a suit or something like this on Amazon, they tell you buy for 7 days, right? And it's going to be a little bit more expensive, but you have the option of, after you use it for 7 days, to give it back to them, right? So over here too, he has the option to what? He has the option to give it to him, for him to try it on, and then maybe he's gonna buy it. Okay? But when it's bevet avel or bet mishneh, since the owner of the lost of the coat that got switched,
no mindset for that.
Who has no mindset for that?
Only the Oman is.
Exactly. Why? Because over here, the owner, he didn't know the mistake, so he never gave the person permission to use the coat. In the case of the Uman, it's the Uman that's giving this guy permission to use the coat, and he has the right to give him permission to use the coat because he's trying to sell it. So he tells him, okay, use the coat. Use the coat until we find the mistake, and then maybe you're gonna buy it afterwards, maybe you're not, whatever, but he has the permission to do it. Okay. Lo shanu, this was only taught, elahu. This is only if the craftsman himself gives the coat, that then the person can use it. Aval, ishto vanav, if it was the wife or kids of the craftsman that made the mistake and gave him someone else's coat, he's not able to continue using the coat. Vehu nami lo amran, ela da amar le talit stam, aval talitecha lo. Haylav talididehu. So he says another thing, that what? When the craftsman, he gives him the talit, what does he tell him? Here is your talit, right? No, that's what normally he should say. But in this case, what did the craftsman say? Here is hine talit. Here is your garment. No. Here is a garment, a garment. He doesn't say your garment. So says the Gemara, based on the fact when the Uman says, here is a garment, and he changed from your garment to a garment, right? What that means is the Uman was conscious of the fact that he gave him someone else's garment, and he's giving it to him with the permission because he might possibly want to buy it afterwards. And it's only because he made this distinction of talit instead of talitcha, meaning he said, here is talit, a talit, instead of your talit. That's why we know that the Uman did it. But if he didn't say if he didn't say a talit and he said your talit, you would not be allowed to use it. Okay. Amar le Abaye le Rava, come let me show you the Ramaim, the cheaters of Pumbedita. My Avdi, what do they do? Amar le Havli sarbalai. So what happens? Reuven, he's the owner of the object, and he gave it to Shimon, the craftsman. So Reuven comes to Shimon and he says, give me back my garment. What does Shimon say? Lo hayu dvarim me'olam. What garment? What are you talking about? You never gave me anything. Says the Gemara, ha'itli sahadi dichazyu agabach. Says Reuven, wait a second. I have witnesses that tell me that what? That I gave it to you. That it's by you. Amar le hahu achina hava. So what does he tell him? He tells him the what the witnesses saw, it's not yours. It's something else that looks exactly like yours. So he says, apikne v'nechzeu. He says, okay, it's like that. So let's take it out and let's see. Amar le ivra lo mapikin alach, lo mapkin ale. No, I will not take it out for you. Why not? Why does the storekeeper or the craftsman, Shimon, have the right to tell Reuven, I'm not taking it out for you? Because, second. Why does he have that right? Because a craftsman, what is he going to say? He's going to say, if I'm going to bring it out and I'm going to show it to everyone, what's going to happen to the garment? It's going to get ruined. If I'm going to bring it out to whoever wants to see it and everything like that, it's going to get ruined. So I'm not bringing it out to you. And says the Gemara, Amar Rabba Shapir Kamane. He's right. He has the right to do something like that. Meaning, what happened? The guy gives him the garment, right? He says, "Give it back to me." He says, "No, you didn't give me anything. What are you talking about? I don't have anything." He says, "I have witnesses." He says, "You have witnesses?" It's something, the witnesses saw is something similar to what you own, but you never gave me anything, so it's not that. He says, okay, so let's see the item. Let's see the item and think. He says, no, I'm not bringing it out to you. Why am I not bringing it out to you? He says, because, listen, if I'm going to bring it up back and forth every time, it's going to get ruined. I don't want to bring it. Says Rabbi, yeah, he has a right. He has a right to say that. Huh? No, he says, yeah, he says, that's what he said. That's what Abaye was telling to Rabbi. He was telling him, come see what these Ramaim are doing. Right? So says the Gemara, he's correct. Why? It says Ra'a Tanya. So says that he has to see the actual item in front of him, and then he can claim it. But if he doesn't see the item, then he can't claim it. Right? Okay. Amar Ravashi. Ravashi says, V'i Hakim, if the person is smart, if the Reuven, the guy that gave him the garment, is smart, Mashvile, what is he going to tell? Mashvile Ra'a. He's going to force him to show it. How is he going to force him to show? Or not force him, he's going to trick him to show it. How is he going to do it? Huh? The Amarle, Amay tafisat le. Lav mishum de itlach gabay. Hashta pikinu. Vishaminhu. Shikol adidach veshkol anadidi. What is he going to tell him? He's going to tell him, you know what? I know why you're doing this. It's because I owe you money, right? And you're holding the garment as a thing. You know what? Let's have a new deal. Let's take it out. Take out the garment that I gave you. Let's evaluate it. And then whatever I owe you or whatever is missing from what I owe you, I'll pay you. So what's the guy going to do? The guy's going to have an interest to take it out. And once he takes it out, what is he going to do? He's going to, it's mine. It's in front of me. It's mine. Give it to me now. Okay? Says the Gemara, Amar le Rav Acha berei de Rav, Avia le Rav Ashi, says, Matzi Amar le, the craftsman, he can get out of this. How can the Ramai, he can get out of this? How can he do this? He says, Matzi Amar le, lo tzrichin la shum adidach, kvar shamua kamai de kamach. He says, I don't need your evaluation of how much it is. Meaning, I don't need to take it out for you to evaluate how much it is. Why? Because I have other people that already evaluated it, and it's worth less. Yeah. It's worth less than what you owe, so I'm taking the garment as a thing. Right? And as long as Reuven doesn't see the garment, he can no longer claim anything. Okay? So, Aris. En lo chazaka. Says the Gemara, Aris, the sharecropper, doesn't have a chazaka. Right? Amai, why not? Ad ha'idna palga v'hashta kula. Till before he claims that he has a chazaka, how much was the guy collecting? He was only collecting part of the field. But after the chazaka, right? How much was he working throughout the chazaka? He was working the whole field. So why shouldn't he have a chazaka? Meaning, if the owner sees that the sharecropper is now taking the fruits of the entire field for 3 years, he should have protested, right? Normally, how much does a sharecropper take? He takes a portion. He takes a little bit. But here, the owner sees that the sharecropper is taking the whole thing. So it would make sense for him to protest, and if he didn't protest, it should be a chazakah. Okay? Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Yochanan says, "Barise bate avot." We're talking about a generational sharecropper. What does that mean? A generational sharecropper is that this field obviously belongs to Reuven. Okay. It belongs to Reuven, and it belonged to Reuven's father, and it belonged to the Reuven's grandfather and his great-grandfather, and it was passed down throughout the generations. All these generations, they always employed the same sharecropper. What does that mean? The same way that it belonged throughout them, the same sharecroppers, meaning the family of sharecroppers was the same. So now what happens? What they're able to do sometimes, and what the practice was sometimes, he would tell them, listen, you know what? Instead of giving you a portion every year, what I'm going to do is I'm going to let you work for a couple of years straight for your pay. So let's say you work for 5 years. I'm going to let you work. I'm going to let you take it for 3 years. Okay? So you work 5 years, you don't get anything. And then afterwards, for 3 years, you get everything. Okay? So now what's going to happen? The guy, before he was working in the field, he didn't take everything. But now, based on their agreement that they had, he's going to work 3 years and take everything in the field. And that's part of their agreement that they had. So why should the owner come and protest? Right? That's why, even though he's a sharecropper and he's working the whole field, if the owner didn't protest, it's not a sign of chazakah. Okay? Amar Rav Nachman, Aris shehorid arisin tachtav yesh lo chazakah. So Rav Nachman says a new thing. He says that if the sharecropper brought other sharecroppers, yesh lo chazakah, right? So now what are we talking about? Where Reuven is the sharecropper. He's working in Shimon's field. And Reuven hires other sharecroppers to work in the field and to take everything. Now Reuven can claim chazaka. Okay. My time. What's the reason? Because it doesn't make sense for a person to allow other sharecroppers to work in his field and not to protest, right? So the fact that he didn't protest, that his own sharecropper brought other sharecroppers to work in the field, siman, that what? That the field now belongs to the sharecropper instead of him. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, aris shechalak la'arisin en lo chazaka. My ta'amar, himur harmania be'alma shavye. He says that if there is if the sharecropper, he's working together with the other sharecroppers, then this chazaka doesn't work anymore. Why? What's the difference going to be between the two cases? The difference between the two cases is, in the first case where we said that it works and the guy's going to have a chazakah, is when the sharecropper, the original sharecropper, the hired sharecropper, is not working in the field at all, and only the subcontracted sharecroppers are working. In that case, the owner is going to say, wait a second, who are these guys? Why are they working in this field? But when the sharecropper hires other sharecroppers to help him out in the field, and he's working together with them, the owner doesn't care. Why? Because he says, my sharecropper is working together with them. He needed extra help. Let him pay them. I don't care. But as long as the guy that I hired is still there, then it's okay. But if the guy that I hired is not there, that's when the problem started, and he should have protested. As long as the guy is still there. Exactly. But as long as the guy is there, so he says, he's just a guest, it's okay, it's not a problem. Says the Gemara, Shalach le Rav Nachman bar Rav Chazda le Rav Nachman bar Yaakov. Yilamdenu Rabbenu, in other words, teach us the halacha. Aris, me'id or eno me'id? Can a sharecropper testify that the field belongs to the owner or no? Havayati v'Rav Yosef kameh. Rabbi Yosef was sitting in front of him, Elmaleh, and he told him, Hachi Amar Shmuel. This is what Shmuel said. Aris me'id. A sharecropper can testify. Behatanya eno me'id. Says in the Braita he can't testify. La kashya. Hadi ikapera be'ara. Hadi le kapera be'ara. It depends. If there's fruit in the land, then the sharecropper, he has an interest to say that it belongs to Reuven, right? Why? Because if Reuven is the thing, he's the sharecropper in the field, he gets part of it. Therefore, that's why the Braita said it doesn't work. However, when we said that it does work, is when there's no longer any fruit in the field. When there's no fruit in the field, what does he care who the field belongs to? He's not anyways not good. There's anyways no interest for him. So therefore, he can testify. Again, says the Gemara, Amalek Siman. What's the Amalek? Siman, Tanu Rabanan. Arev me'id lalove. An arev, what's an arev? A guarantor is able to testify to the love, to the borrower. Vehu de'itle ara acheti, on the condition that the borrower has other land. What does that mean? That means if let's make it Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Okay, Reuven gives Shimon $100. He lends him $100. Levi is the guarantor. Levi is allowed to testify that this is Shimon's field. Why is he? What happens if Shimon doesn't have? What happens if Shimon doesn't have 100? What happens if Shimon doesn't have 100 to pay? This field is going to have to go to Reuven now, right? And why does Levi have an interest? Why does Levi have an interest? Levi, we said, is the Arev. Levi is Reuven, lender. Shimon, borrower. Levi, Arev, guarantor. Reuven gives Shimon $100. Shimon has a field. Yehuda is coming along and saying, Shimon, this field doesn't belong to you. It belongs to someone else. Levi is able to come and say, no, the field belongs to Shimon. Well, wait a second. Doesn't Levi have an interest that the field should stay by Shimon? Why?
go after him
in case Shimon doesn't have money to pay, what's going to happen? Reuven is going to come take the field from Shimon instead of having to go to Levi, right? So why? So he has an interest. Why should he be able to testify? Says the Gemara, he's only able to testify if Shimon has a second field. If Shimon has a second field, so that means that even if Yehuda is going to collect this field, there's still another field for him to pay off the loan. So therefore, there's no interest. It's okay. Okay? So that's one. Arev me'id. That's the first one. That's the ayin. Mem is what? Malveh me'id lalove. The how do you call it? The lender is able to testify on the borrower. What happened? Again, Reuven gave Shimon $100. Yehuda is coming along and saying, hey, Shimon, you have a field. This field belongs to me. Reuven now wants to say, no, this field belongs to Shimon. But wait a second, doesn't he have an interest again? He has an interest. Why? Because if Shimon isn't able to pay back the field, what's he going to do? He's going to go to the field and take it. But if Yehuda is going to take the field, now he doesn't have to pay how to pay back his loan. Says the Gemara, you're right. Again, but this is when can Reuven testify for Shimon? Only if he has another land that he can collect from, possibly. But if you meaning he has two lands and Yehuda is contesting one, so if he takes one, so Reuven can still take the other one. Lokeach Rishon. The first buyer, what does the first buyer mean? It means that, let's say, Shimon had a few fields. Okay? He sold, the first field that he sold was to Reuven. The second field that he sold was to Levi. Okay? Now, Yehuda comes along and says, Levi, the field that you just bought from Shimon, it belongs to me. Reuven is allowed to come and testify that the field belongs to the field belonged to Shimon and not to Yehuda. Why? What's again? That's going to be the answer. But what would be the problem? What would be the problem? Let's say they take the field from the second buyer. Okay, they take the field from the second buyer. Now, what happens if Shimon has debtors? Shimon owes money to someone. Who are they going to come collect the field from? They're going to come to collect the field from Reuven. So in that case, Reuven shouldn't be allowed to testify that the second buyer's field really belonged to Shimon. But he's allowed to. Why? Again, same concept. Vehu the itle al achiti, as long as he has other land. Okay? And then the Gemara is going to go on to say Kablan is the fourth one. Amalek, Ayin Mem, Lamed, right? Love, Lokeach, sorry, Lokeach, and then Kuf is going to be Kablan. Kablan is a person who basically he says you can collect from me the loan as much as you can collect from the borrower. Meaning it's another level of guaranteeing. That what? Reuven lends Shimon money, right? And Levi is the guarantor. But he's a guarantor in the way that what? That Reuven, if Reuven wants, he can come straight to Levi to collect the money, as opposed to having to pass through Shimon first and going thing. Okay, so that's going to be Kablan, and Be'ezat Hashem, this is gonna be spoken about tomorrow, Be'ezat Hashem, or on Sunday. Be'ezat Hashem. Amen.